another episode of the Square and Compass podcast. Back with, well, when I talked to him before, he hadn't quite ascended yet to most worshipful status, but he's there now. Most worshipful, Brother Cameron Bailey of the Grand Lodge of Washington. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me, brother. I really appreciate it.
I mean, I will always appreciate having another Cameron on the show. All the best people are named Cameron, so it's much appreciated.
Yes, indeed.
So, I mean, let's just start with that. The what's it been like? The process of becoming the Grand Master, and also, or a Grand Master, in the state of Washington, and especially under such unique circumstances. Kind of because when you became Grand Master, COVID, knock on wood, it's starting to recede a little bit as vaccination rates go up and all that. But I mean, just what's it been like both becoming a Grand Master and then serving as Grand Master under very unique circumstances?
Yeah, so in Washington, we have competitive elections for the office of Junior Grand Warden. So I was lucky in that I had 2 years, 2 years as Grand Warden before COVID, and so I was able to get out all over our jurisdiction and meet the brothers who would eventually become members of my Grand Lodge team and district deputies and so on. But then of course COVID struck, and Masonry in Washington. Well, we were very quick to embrace new technology, so it didn't ever close, but it certainly moved online, and it stayed online for a year and a half. Luckily, I was installed in the middle of June, and we were able to reopen in-person Masonry at that same time. Since then, I think it's been great. Lodges, they're not where we were pre-pandemic with attendance and so on in a lot of lodges, because we do have some brothers with pre-existing conditions and things like that who are still a little hesitant to return to lodge, and that's understandable. But for the most part, most of our active members are all back. We're performing degrees and enjoying great fellowship, and have been since the middle of June.
Do you think that is that hesitancy just a matter of time, or are there things that lodges can do, a bit mass vaccination, whatever it is, like, are there things lodges can do to help with some of that hesitancy, or do you think it's just a matter of time for some of the maybe older or immunocompromised brethren?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a matter of time for the COVID to be better under control. Because I think as I've been traveling around to lodges, I think that all of our lodges are doing a great job. Right? I hit lodge rooms. I'm seeing the sanitizers. I'm seeing evidence of thorough cleanings between events. Lodges making sure that they aren't being attended by sick brothers and so on and so forth. All the protocols. So I think our lodges have those things in place very diligently. So for brothers who are hesitating, I do think it's a matter of time until the virus is brought better under control. And of course, we had believed that we'd largely been there before the Delta variant, came through and boosted our numbers in Washington quite high again.
Talking about the steps that lodges are taking, Yeah, this is something I haven't looked into a lot, but I'm curious. Well, in Washington State, by and large, are do Masons, lodges own their own temples or their own buildings, or do a lot of them rent out space from other areas, other like rent out space from a building?
Yeah, so most of our lodges either own their own Masonic temple, or they rent space in a Masonic temple. We do have a few who meet in restaurants, hotel conference centers, churches, but that number's pretty small. I don't believe that any of those commercial spaces um, have placed additional restrictions on the activities of the lodges beyond what all lodges have had to deal with. But we did have some issue with Masonic temples that weren't ready to open when the lodges were ready to open, and so there were some cases where lodges had to move to another Masonic temple nearby because they weren't able to get into their regular meeting place.
That is an interesting, challenge. I mean, we're seeing it in Ontario. I think it's primarily, well, but it's not only a COVID issue per se, right? The responsibilities of a Masonic meeting place or a temple, or you're renting spaces out and things like that, right? There's all sorts of government rules and regulations that are put in place that then have to get enforced at the lodge level. It's just an interesting challenge, right? It's kind of, in one sense, the new challenge, but in another sense, right, it's always been there in some ways. Like when, especially if a Masonic temple is also a public meeting hall or has events for the public, to gain revenue, trying to balance out the Masonic responsibilities of a building with its place in the community. So I'm sure COVID kind of, if not exacerbated, kind of brought those tensions more to light in a way. But I'm glad to hear that the lodges are doing, so well in addressing some of these concerns and in, trying to be as safe as possible for their vulnerable membership. During COVID, what type of things did you see? Like, were lodges keeping in touch with their vulnerable members? And because you brought up at the start, and I really like what you brought up, you said Masonic activity was still going on, but not in-person meetings. And I think that's an important distinction. A lot of people have said, we'll say Masonic activity, stopped in Ontario. And I'm always quick to point out, no, Masonic activity has still been going on in a lot of different ways. The in-person meetings may have stopped, but we've been doing a lot of other things. At University Lodge in Seattle, I had a chance to attend a lot of their virtual meetings and events, and they were always terrific. So just what was Seattle doing, or what was Washington State doing while meetings were suspended to kind of maintain Masonic activity?
Yeah, I think there were two things that most of our lodges did, and first of all, I think a lot of them were very good at reaching out, especially to the more vulnerable members, the elderly members, making sure that they were doing all right. Uh, Even our concordant bodies, like in my small hometown, we have an active rainbow group, and uh, the Rainbow Girls swung by my house a couple times, just to make sure that I and all the other Masons who live in this town were doing well and didn't need any help, and I think our lodges were really good at that. The other thing we did, as you mentioned, we embraced Zoom, and we did it pretty early on, and we used it, I think, after an initial shakedown period, very well for education, right? My lodge, we had speakers from the East Coast. We had a speaker from Mexico. I was at a Zoom meeting for a neighboring lodge that had someone from the Philippines. And what a great way to hear from brothers that in the ordinary times, our lodge never would have been able to afford to bring these speakers in to speak to us in person, but we were certainly able to do those things on Zoom, and what a great opportunity it's been for us. And some lodges, including my own, have actually continued that, and we're now doing hybrid meetings uh, in person, but for the educational components, we turn on Zoom as well, and welcome in those brothers who may have moved away or can't attend for some other reason.
Well, that brings up, yeah, I've talked about this with a few different guests on the podcast and even just amongst my own brothers. Do you think that a stronger virtual component is kind of here to stay in Freemasonry, even after all the jurisdictions have resumed in-person meetings? Do you suspect we'll continue to find uses for Zoom and for in Ontario its go-to meeting? And just, to what extent do you think the virtual is here to stay?
Yeah, I do think it's here to stay. Um, the hybrid meetings, I think a lot of lodges are going to keep those, especially as we get more and more practiced. We're figuring out the technology, right? So it's not we got 3 laptops in the room and we're kind of walking them around. We can get cameras and monitors and speakers that can make a lodge meeting actually feel like a lodge meeting. And so as lodges continue to invest in that technology, uh, I think they're at least some are gonna keep those virtual components, especially in Western Washington. We have a tremendous number of snowbirds who've moved to the sun uh, through the winter every year, and what a great way to keep those people involved and informed with their home lodge while they're not here and not able to attend otherwise. I also think for administrative things, we've learned how perfect it is. My example would be we've spent decades with this jurisdiction divided into districts, and we take a weekend and we go see a district and meet with the deputy and the worshipful masters, and the time that takes for that administrative um, meetings is just tremendous. But we've been able to move that to Zoom, which in turn frees up our time and our resources so that we can instead visit those brothers and those areas for fellowship and for masonry instead of for administration. And so for things like that, I really think it's our fraternity's adoption of it has been a tremendous boon, and I don't think it'll go away.
And then, moving on from, I guess, then that becomes the question of, or do you think Freemasonry will struggle to find a balance? Because I have heard some Masons express concern that if the virtual option is open and available, I mean, I'm doing this meeting right now. I didn't realize till about 5 minutes ago I had my stripper club t-shirt on. I might not be wearing pants. Who knows? To go to a lodge, there's a dress code. I don't know for your jurisdiction, but in Ontario, most lodges there's a dress code, suit and tie. You have to find the time to get there. are you worried it may encourage, or how do Masons make sure that when they go into that they are allowed to keep the virtual, or they keep the virtual without perhaps detracting from the in-person meetings?
Yeah, so we considered that a lot before we came back. If a virtual option was available, even for part of the meeting, which is how we're doing it, part of the meeting, would people stay at home who should otherwise be in lodge? And in the months since, we haven't seen any evidence of that. And I think while the virtual part of the meeting is good, especially if it's an educational topic with a great speaker, a great presenter, it's still not as fulfilling as going, right? You're not shaking the hands of your brother. You're not sharing time with your brother. You're not able to toast your brother. And so excuse me. I just don't think that the that the concerns that people will stay away from lodge if we make some part of Freemasonry available online has proven out to be correct, because I think Freemasonry at its core is an organization of men getting together, and that's what drew us all to it, I think. And sitting in our living rooms, it just isn't the same.
I want to switch topics a little bit, talk about something that I think has been, this was put to me in an interview I did with a past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of California. He created the Masonic Family Civility Project, which I'll leave a link for others to know about it, or for anybody. But I really liked one thing that he said, and I think this is something for Grand Masters and for anybody to think about, which is, the importance of Freemasonry being relevant in its communities, or lodges being relevant to their communities in which they're located. And I like that because I think, oftentimes Freemasons, I think the big mistake that perhaps Freemasonry made is we put an emphasis on chasing members, or trying to increase membership, but not trying to increase relevancy. The idea being that, Freemasonry would only be relevant to a person if he is a member, or if he is, maybe a family member. But there was a time, and I've been doing some research on this, I want to write something for Medium, where, you didn't have to be a Freemason to recognize that the Masonic Lodge and Temple were important parts of the community and were relevant to that community. So this is a long way around. I guess my question too is, as as a Grand Master, and just in the state of Washington, how important is it, do you think, or in what ways can Freemasonry demonstrate or increase its relevance in the communities? Not in a goal or desire to get more members, but just to show that this is an important part of the community, communities in which it's located.
Yeah, I actually I think that in far too many cases we communicate the exact opposite of relevance, right? And what I mean by that is, we have buildings, sometimes like my lodge, very major buildings in our communities that are used a couple of times a month, and they appear to be dead buildings owned by a dead organization, right? If the lights are never on, if there's never people. And that is such a terrible mistake, because if we're going to own these things, and if we're going to be a part of our community, well, then we have to be a benefit to our community. So we need to open these buildings. We need to get the lights on in there. We need to get people in there. And we need to participate in our community in whatever way we're able. And by doing that, we are going to, again, as we did perhaps 100 years ago, appear to be a vital and important part of our community. But it's not going to happen if the lights are off 28 days a year out of the month, right? We've got to open it up for other community groups to use, right? So many groups aren't blessed with spaces like we are. So open it up. Get the downtown association or the Chamber of Commerce involved. Get a meeting in there. One of our lodges turned a visitor information center, a tourist hub, and worked with the Chamber of Commerce to get that into their lodge. So
Which lodge was that?
That lodge would be Sultan Monroe Lodge.
I would love to talk to them about that because that's very cool.
Okay, I can get you their information.
I mean, what a great idea of all the, of all the things to have in a Masonic temple. What better ways is there to get people in the building, but also to, demonstrate to the community, right, your support of it, but to have a tourist visitor place where you're not only are you promoting the Masonic Temple, but I'd assume, right, you're promoting all the great things in that community, in the state, right? That's a very cool idea.
Yes. Yeah, and so I think that things like that, anything we can do like that increases our relevance. Another thing another lodge does, and appropriate for this time of year, so many small towns, the merchants open up their places of business for Halloween and invite in trick-or-treaters on the afternoon of Halloween. Well, so we decided some years ago, let's get out there and stand on the sidewalk and give candy out to the kids, and we partnered with our tenant, and so they're out there as well, and just being with the community. Incidentally, the Rainbow girls joined us, and if you grabbed a Reese's candy bar from the Rainbow girls, well, it had a little card on it taped to it, explaining a little bit about their organization. So even these really small things are centered around holidays and so on can begin to connect us with our communities. But we can't remain insular and insulated from our communities.
Do you have any thoughts as to where kind of the insular tendency seems to have come from? Like, I've heard Masons say, it's a Masonic tradition to be insular, but I mean, I think that's a newer phenomenon. I mean, you go back and you look at old newspaper clippings. I mean, in smaller towns, even in Windsor, they would announce, congratulations to the next incoming worshipful master, Great Western Lodge. Like, meetings were announced on the radio because it was one of the only ways to contact people, in the 50s and 60s. You even saw, Copperhead Road, right? The Masonic Lodge is mentioned specifically in that song as a place police auction was being held. But I'm not sure. I feel like this whole idea that it was, an insular and mysterious organization, I don't know if that's a true, correct reading of it, at least in the 19th and 20th centuries, maybe when it first started. Or do you have any thoughts as to
Yeah, I don't think it was insular either. I know of at least 3 Masonic lodges in our jurisdiction that long ago acted as the town movie theater, right? They'd set up a screen and they had a little projection room and they would show movies. I know that our lodges had had community dances and all manners of things like that. What I think happened, and this isn't based on a lot of research, but it's based on a little bit, is between the world wars, but most especially after the Second World War, we were growing so quickly, at least in this jurisdiction. We had so many degrees that I believe we largely, the members at that time exhausted themselves. We have minutes showing a lodge doing degrees every single night of the week except Sunday. And I think that, lodges got tired. I also think you couldn't very well have a community dance or a community party if you were doing a degree that night either, right? And so I think we also fell out of the habit. But I'm reminded of a personal experience I had this past summer. I was in a small town for a vacation, not for a Masonic reason, but I always wear a Masonic polo shirt. And I'm in a little shop, and the owner of the store asked me, well, do we have a Masonic group in this town? And I think to myself, well, you must walk by it every day because the temple is 3 doors down from here, right? But I didn't say that, and I assured him that yes, we did, and told him, where to find it. And then he asked me, well, do you have one of the ladies groups there too? And I said, yeah. And so here's a guy, tied in with his community enough that he owns a building in town. He owns a building extremely close to the Masonic Hall and didn't know if there were still Masons in that city. And I just have to believe that if once in a while the lights were on, there was a sign out there inviting people in for some event or another, he wouldn't have had those questions, and he'd know that we were a part of his community.
And then, I mean, that goes also to, yourself as the Grand Master in your travels. Well, I guess as things are reopening everywhere, right? I'm assuming lodges are getting back into the swing of things. What's your travel schedule been like? Have you found, has it picked, I'm guessing it's picked up pretty substantially in the past few months.
Yeah, my travel's been very extensive inside the jurisdiction. I'm doing my best to visit 3 or 4 lodges a week. So yeah, that's been great, getting out and seeing everyone and just experiencing Freemasonry again. When we first reopened in June, a lot of our work was pretty darn rusty after not even seeing it for a year and a half, but that issue quickly went away, and yeah, no, so I've been doing a great deal of traveling and having a lot of fun with it, as has the gentleman behind me.
It has the majority of the travel. I'm guessing the majority of the travel has been within the state. Have you had the chance to visit any lodges outside of Washington? I'm trying to think of my American geography. Oregon, Idaho would be close to you, I think.
No, you're right on the geography. No, I've not yet visited a lodge outside of the jurisdiction. I did go to Houston earlier this year for the Shrine Imperial Sessions, and I am headed off to the Grand Lodge of Nevada's annual communication shortly. But other than that, I have just been around Washington and Washington Masons.
I just did an interview. It'll be out. So we're recording this on October 25th. October 27th, my interview with the Grand Master of Nevada will be up. So I'll put a link to
Excellent.
that. But yeah,
He's
he's a
a
very cool
great
guy.
friend.
Very, very good
Great
talking
guy.
to him.
Yes.
Are you driving there? It's in Reno, right? Are you driving there, or are you able to?
Oh no, I'll fly down to Reno. Yeah.
I have no idea how far Reno is from you. Or I was telling, I don't even know how far Reno, like where Reno is. When I think of Nevada, I think of Las Vegas, and that's it. Which I'm sure people in Nevada love.
Yeah.
Uh, what about when is Washington's Grand Lodge?
Middle of June.
So you're just starting out. You've got a long way to go.
Yeah, I think I'm 4 or 5 months in. So
What was Grand Lodge like? I'm guessing because middle of June means lodges are starting to meet again. Things were getting back to normal. Was there a lot of excitement at Grand Lodge amongst Masons about the opportunity to meet again? And like, what was the feeling like returning to Grand Lodge?
yeah, we were still limited. So we couldn't have everyone who wanted to attend there with us. Uh, Two of the notable limitations were we only were able to accept one man per lodge, and the other was we weren't able to invite any foreign Grand Lodges to be with us. But that said, we had a great turnout. Certainly, we filled the convention center up to the capacity they were allowed legally with the COVID restrictions they had, and yeah, excitement was very high, and it was a great event. One thing one thing we did do is we shortened it by a day, and so we had to move extremely quickly through all the legislation and elections and so on, uh, in order to get everything done in a shorter amount of time. But yeah, it was wholly positive.
Are the majority of lodges in Washington State, are the majority of them coastal, or do you have a lot kind of spread out through the interior? Just think you ever get to visit a lodge. Seafood's my favorite thing, so I'd love to visit a coastal lodge. Maybe the JW have some seafood ready for me.
Yeah, so we actually don't have too many lodges on the Pacific coast. We do have them scattered over there, but yes, along the Puget Sound and the Strait of Juan de Fuca, we have a lot of lodges, and and yes, indeed, they will feed you seafood, especially our lodge, Mount Olympus Lodge, which is as far west in Washington as you can get. Well, once a year they will have an unbelievably good salmon barbecue every summer. So if you ever make it down in the summer, certainly visit Mount Olympus Lodge and hit them for some of that barbecue salmon. But other than that, no, we do have lodges scattered throughout the state, west and east of the Cascades. We're pretty well diverse across
Gonna
the
say,
climates.
I wish I'd known about this salmon barbecue sooner. I could have gone this summer, but there's always next summer to go check it out. Um, the that's to your knowledge, it's probably hard to get the data on this, but once again, as things start to reopen and lodges are reopening, are you finding that there's a lot of visitation, people coming into the state? I know, if I recall correctly, November 8th is when travel restrictions are lifted to drive across the Canadian American border. So I'm wondering if maybe you'll see some British Columbia Masons, some Vancouver Masons making it across. But are you finding Masons from Idaho traveling in? And are you just the visitation and travel in general? Are you seeing that resume?
Yeah, I don't think that there's been very much lessening of travel between states. That seems to, at least my perception, that seems to be near where it always has been. we did lose, and we have events every year with our brethren from British Columbia and the Yukon, and we have had to cancel all of those since COVID began, and that's been very sad. So I hope um, that, as you say, when those restrictions come off in November, we can start renewing that cross-border visitation. It's great for us, and I hope that our presence in BC is good for those lodges too, because British Columbia and Washington State, we are truly very close sister jurisdictions, not only in Masonry but the states as well.
I'd imagine, yeah. Like I was reading a lot of articles about just the economic toll that the border shutdown took on a lot of businesses and stuff relying on cross-border transportation and cross-border travel. So, knock on, November 8th, knock on wood, that's supposed to be the date, and it'll be great to see, I'm sure. And then, well, I've never actually visited any Masonic lodges or Freemasonry in British Columbia. I wonder when their Grand Lodge is and if it's coming up soon. I'm guessing a lot of a lot of visitation for that, for the Grand Lodges and things like that.
Yeah, if memory serves, theirs is close to ours in the summer.
So my last question, I'm sure you're very, very busy, so you probably don't have time for a lot of things, is the life of a Grand Master. But the first time I spoke with you, it was in response to a really excellent work that you had produced. I'm just pulling it up here, and I put a link to it. I'll put a link to it again in the description to this video, because I really encourage brethren to check it out. Anything else you're working on that people can check out, and the future of Freemasonry? Any other things you're working on? But I'm guessing most of your time is spent with Grand Lodge responsibilities, which are legion.
Yes, no, I do continue to try and write weekly and write and post. Everything is on emeth, emeth.substack.com. And I try to come up with at least one quality Masonic essay a week and post there. So I hope anybody who's interested in reading my own thoughts as they ramble around will feel free to check that out. Another thing we are planning that I'm really looking forward to is we are having I'm calling it a Grand Lodge Christmas party, but in reality, we are flying any of our members who are able to join us, and we're all going to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, in the middle of December. We're going to visit a lodge while we're there. We're going to spend some time with the Grand Master of the York Grand Lodge of Mexico, and we're going to have a great Christmas bash. I think the numbers people going are quite a bit higher than we expected, so I think it's going to be a truly wonderful time and something different and unique for our Grand Lodge.
What's the is it like a chartered plane? Like that's a really cool idea. I've heard of people doing it with cruises.
Yeah, we're not chartering a plane. I suppose we have more than enough people. We probably could have, but people want to fly out of different places. We have three major airports that run flights into Puerto Vallarta in Washington. So we're not doing that, but we are all staying in the same hotel, same location, and we will sort of turn it into a Masonic temple for a week, I think.
Is it open to, if Masons want to take part, like can Masons from out of your jurisdiction fly in? Is there still space available? somebody wants to take part, how do they do it? All that good jazz.
So our hotel is completely full. Sorry about that. But yeah, if someone wanted to come while we were there, that would certainly be fine. I'm not sure how I would get you the details of dates and places to stay and so on and so forth.
If you want, I mean, shoot me off an email afterwards. But
Okay.
I just think it might be a neat thing because, well, certainly I would encourage other Masonic jurisdictions to consider something similar. I mean, I know some have done cruises, but like I said, I've never heard of like a group of Masons flying in together to a location and kind of taking over the hotel. I'm sure the hotel appreciates it too. Like, that's something we talked about a lot with this podcast is, Masonic events can mean a lot to go back to the relevancy point, right? Like a Masonic event can mean a lot to the communities in which they take place, just in terms of the business income you're bringing in. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, that's part of my hope. I know that part of ARDA, for example, was hit extremely hard economically with COVID because the economy depends wholly on a little bit of fishing, but the vast majority is all tourism, and they were hit extremely hard. I have friends and family there, so have a good finger on the pulse of the city. So yes, I'm hoping that we can make a strong financial impact, at least for some people while we're there. We did manage to fill a hotel. It's not quite high season yet when we're going down, so that's great, and we'll fill the restaurants and shops surrounding it. So,
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, I was at
do
the
some-
Grand Lodge of California in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Beautiful spot. I didn't like the fact that the Grand Lodge was on a giant hill and I had to wheel to the top of it. That was bullshit, Grand Lodge. That was not a fun way to wake up in the morning and see that. But when I got there, but you look at how packed it was, and I'm sure every restaurant, every server at the restaurants, every hotel, saw a pretty nice increase in their bottom lines. But how many of them knew that increase was the result of Masons, coming to the city, right?
Well, that's why we need to wear our Masonic shirts and our rings and our hats and
I
keep
concur completely with
advertising
that.
our fraternity.
I agree 100%. Well, most worshipful sir, once again, everybody watching this, check out the description. The most worshipful Grandmaster's link for the Substack is on there. He's got some great, whether you're entered apprentice, whether you're whatever level you are in the craft, there's a lot of really valuable insights. So check it out for sure. Most worshipful sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, brother. I really appreciate it.